People often wonder why I travel alone. Is it my choice, they ask, or a necessity? The answer I've come to realize is more the former than the latter. I happen to like my own company and enjoy the freedom that solo travel permits me. When I travel, I am beholden to no one.
Bravo, Riccardo!
For this, the second of my sexagenarian trips to Italy, I educated myself on the sights and the artwork that I would see during my sojourn in Rome, Naples, Pompeii, Sorrento, and the Amalfi Coast. I studied history and read the biographies of the Renaissance and Baroque masters such as Michelangelo, Raphael, Da Vinci, Donatello, Bernini, and Caravaggio. I also fleshed out my understanding of the times with novels such as Irving Stone's The Agony and the Ecstasy, and Susan Dunant's excellent books about life during the Renaissance. To me, knowing the history and the art of the lands that I visit is the quintessential art of travel. Let's begin, however, in Germany with a family visit. David has been stationed in Spangdahl in Germany for almost 3 years, and every European trip means a visit with him, Kelly, and my granddaughter Addie. Ironically, I met them in Frankfurt because Kelly and Addie were flying out the next day to San Diego. We had dinner and I was able to hug my granddaughter and marvel at how grown up she was. After they left the next morning, David and I explored the modern and well-functioning city of Frankfurt before returning to Spangdahl, where I was able to tour the fire station, and David and I could have a bit of father-son time together. Italy, however, was the focus of my trip, and on Saturday, October 5th, I caught a Ryanair flight to Rome and arrived in the morning with a whole day ahead of me. Transfer from Rome's Ciampino Airport to Termini Station could not have gone smoother, and I soon found myself at Elsa's Airbnb residence just a few blocks south of the Colosseum. Elsa was a lovely and dignified woman in her mid to late 70s who greeted me personally, addressing me respectfully as Caro Professore, or Dear Teacher. I rested a bit and then headed out, excited to see Rome once again. Rome is a city made for walking, and so I skipped the buses and metro and walked in the general direction of the Villa Borghese, a large park that featured the Galleria Borghese and its superb collection of art. In my walk, I passed by the Colosseum, Roman Forum, Piazza Venezia, Piazza Barberini, and so much more as I enjoyed the bright, clear weather and the bustling of the world's most beautiful city. My feet began to ache, a recurring malady throughout my trip, but I pressed on, surprised and delighted by every turn and twist of Rome's streets and alleys. Cardinal Scipione Borghese collected many fine works of art and sculpture in his sumptuous home. The family sold the home to the Italian government at the turn of the century, and it now is the Galleria Borghese. It is decorated and furnished heavily with Baroque works, particularly those of Gian Lorenzo Bernini. Bernini often chose themes from Greek mythology and would sculpt the climactic moment of the story. His sculptures evoked movement and emotion. Into a medium of marble, Bernini put life and action. In his treatment of the story of Apollo and Daphne, he shows the climactic moment when the lustful Apollo, having been struck by Cupid's arrow, is thwarted when Daphne appeals to her father, the river god, to save her, and she is turned into a laurel tree. You see her fingers and extremities beginning to sprout leaves as Apollo is unaware that his desire will be left unfulfilled. In another hall, I was asked by Federico, our guide, to state whether I thought that this reclining figure was a man or a woman. I stated emphatically that it was a woman due to her lovely backside. Well, we had a good laugh when we examined her front side more carefully. It was a sculpture of Hermaphrodite, who sported a female form with male components. There were more works by Bernini, ancient Roman and Greek sculptures, and paintings by Caravaggio, and we did not see them all. The Galleria Borghese certainly merits a second and a third visit. I found my way to Piazza Navona and a pizza place by the Pantheon that I had discovered during my last trip. It was all-you-can-eat pizza with a beer for only €10 and, most importantly, a place to sit down and rest my feet. I skipped Trastevere that evening and made it an early night. I bought an Italian SIM card for my cell phone at Termini Station the next morning, blissfully unaware that my purchase set in motion a circumstance of dire consequences. My plan for the day was to visit St. Peter's Basilica in the morning, but by the time I arrived, the security line was extensive and I decided to return to Central Rome and visit the Capitoline Museum. To the right of the massive and unloved monolithic Piazza Venezia are the graceful Michelangelo-designed steps and square of the Campidoglio. In its center is a copy of the great statue of the Emperor Marcus Aurelius on horseback. My Roma pass, purchased yesterday, allowed me free entrance and no line. The Capitoline Museum is a repository of Roman history and artifacts featuring the original bronze statue of Marcus Aurelius and the famous symbol of the founding of Rome, Romulus and Remus suckling a she-wolf. After the Capitoline, I strolled through the Roman Forum and visited the Palatine Hill. I ventured out to Trastevere that evening. After a long walk past the Colosseum to Circus Maximus, I caught a tram to Trastevere and walked among its narrow streets searching for a likely place to eat. My plans were to video chat with Diana over an Aperol Spritz and then eat well. I accomplished both those tasks and also met a lovely couple from England with whom I spoke for an hour about travel, politics, and family. It was only after I returned to my Airbnb and did an inventory of my possessions that I realized that I was missing my passport. I made it a point not to panic, and with information gleaned from the internet, I vowed to enjoy tomorrow's early morning visit to the Vatican Museums before hightailing it down to the American Embassy. During my trip to Italy in the spring of 2018, I had arrived in the Vatican Museum's late morning and looked askance at the long lines just to get a ticket. To avoid the wait, I took the offer of an expensive skip-the-line tour. The 2-hour tour was excellent, but the crowds were oppressive and the experience was hectic and numbing. For this trip, I swore to avoid the crowds and purchased an early morning entry that would provide me with breakfast and allow me to enter an hour before the museums officially opened. The difference was remarkable. I strolled down the gleaming halls with perhaps 20 other people instead of 600, and I was even able to find a seat in the Sistine Chapel to sit and contemplate the individual panels painted by Michelangelo. After my wonderful experience at the Vatican Museums, I knew that I had to take care of my passport problems, so I skipped St. Peter's Basilica and caught a bus to Termini Station, that great hub of transportation, and walked to the Via Veneto and the American Embassy. I was expecting at best a half day of excruciating bureaucratic tedium, but after a thorough security check by a pleasant Italian woman, I found myself, along with others in a similar situation, in an office where I was helped immediately by kind and efficient employees. In just over an hour, I had my temporary passport in hand and was headed out the door. I found my way to the Pantheon, once a pagan temple built in the 2nd century AD, that to this day boasts the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world and has been consecrated the church. Within its rotunda can be found the tombs of 2 kings of Italy and the artist Raffaello. I treated myself to my favorite place for pizza and beer and returned to my Airbnb to rest before heading out for a very unique experience: bicycling in Rome. Rome is not a city designed for bicycle traffic, and I was curious as to how this tour would work. I met our guide Caterina and 4 other participants just a ways from Piazza Venezia. Caterina, for the most part, led us down alleyways and narrow streets with only the occasional foray into a busy boulevard. Our itinerary included the synagogue in the Jewish ghetto, Teatro Marcello, Palatine Hill, Campidoglio, Parco Oppio, Parco Cello, Circus Maximus, and more, with a specific stop on a hill overlooking the Colosseum and Roman Forum for sunset pictures. I said my farewell to Rome and boarded the high-speed Frecciarossa to Naples, enjoying the company of a vacationing couple from Virginia. I was on my way to catching the Circumvesuviana train to Pompeii when I realized that I had left my backpack on the train. The story is much too long for this video, but suffice it to say that I was able to retrieve it 3 hours later, missing my backup camera and 2 thumb drives. The Circumvesuviana narrow-gauge train was standing room only for the hour-long trip to Pompeii. Along the main thoroughfare, there were restaurants, shops, bakeries, theaters, and fine homes.
This was an ancient bar called the Thermopolium. The thermos is warm and polium itself.
Also of interest were the brothels that serviced an international clientele. Phalluses were displayed to guide the lustful, and the graffiti scratched on the walls is shockingly graphic. Men, women, and animals were caught by the pyroclastic ash cloud that descended upon the city and made the famous plaster casts of their last moments possible. Word of warning: Google Maps can lead one astray. My 5-minute walk from the train station to Mary's Airbnb took 40 minutes because Google Maps directed me to another town. Max, Mary's husband, came and got me by car, and my long, tiring day ended about 8 p.m. I cleaned up and followed their recommendation for a restaurant and had a good meal. Next morning's breakfast in my well-appointed room did much to erase the stress of the day before. Piano di Sorrento is about 15 minutes from Sorrento proper by bus, and I arrived overlooking the beautiful Mediterranean Sea. The touristy little town had much charm, and I eventually found my way down to Marina Piccola to board a ferry for the Isle of Capri. The day was exquisitely beautiful, with a cloudless sky, deep blue waters, and temperatures in the mid-70s. I purchased a boat tour around the island and visited the famous Grotta Azzurra, the Blue Grotto.
Signori italiani, non li ho sentiti, ve lo vogliono passare? Sì, andiamo? Oh mamma mia, alleluia. Maestri, not before.
We passed through the famous Faraglione rocks and stopped at several remote beaches to marvel at the brilliant colors and transparent waters. It was a relaxing and pleasant trip, much different from my tiring, stress-filled trip the day before. It was just what I needed. I took another boat to visit the Blue Grotto, which had a wait of 1 hour. I passed the time chatting with Diane and Connie from Oklahoma City until it was our turn to board the small boat that would take us through the tiny entrance into the grotto. We were asked to lie flat in the boat as the boatman hauled on a chain when the waves permitted and we zipped inside a large, dark cavern. The water, however, was a brilliant blue, as advertised. It reflected the color from the sunlight outside and was quite remarkable. Some boatmen sang and chatted. Diane, Connie, and I decided that our boatman was somewhat of a buzzkill. No song and a rather gruff demeanor. We got our pictures, though, and enjoyed the experience. The rest of the day was spent taking the funicular to Anacapri and enjoying its village-like ambiance before returning to Sorrento that evening. Warnings about the hairpin turns and the cliffside drop-offs on the route to Amalfi were not exaggerated. I took the seat of us but was unable to secure a seat and sat on the step in the back and fought off nausea for an hour trip to Positano. Most left in Positano and I grabbed a seat for the rest of the trip to Amalfi. It's a beautiful coastline, and again, the weather was perfect. Today was to be another rest day with little requirements to do or see anything except stroll, eat, and drink in the atmosphere. Amalfi has its Duomo and the remains of Christ's first disciple and apostle, St. Andrew. The basilica is lovely, and its importance to pilgrims is quite evident. St. Andrew was asked by Jesus to become a fisher of men, and so his statues almost always show him with a fish. In the Middle Ages, Amalfi was attacked by Turkish pirates, and the people fled to the church to pray. According to tradition, a great storm came up and destroyed the pirates, whose carved wooden plank from the ship is displayed in the church as a testament to the intervention of St. Andrew. I wasn't about to brave the coast road again, so I threw away my return ticket for the Cita bus and paid 14 euros for a comfortable and pleasant ferry ride back to Sorrento. Since I enjoyed the ferry much more than the other modes of transportation, I avoided the Circumvesuviana train back to Naples and took the boat. In an hour, I arrived at the Molo Beverolo on the Naples waterfront, caught a cab to my hotel, and dropped off my baggage. Check-in time was not until 3, so I caught the metro to the historic center with plans to visit Naples Museum of Archaeology featuring treasures from Pompeii. The remarkable thing about the museum was not just its collection, but the fact that there were no lines. The ground floor consisted of the Farnese collection. This was a powerful family during the Renaissance that collected contemporary Renaissance as well as ancient works of art. The Toro Farnese, a Roman copy of a Greek work, was restored by Michelangelo and other masters for the family. In another hall is the Farnese Hercules, who leans heavily against his club in exhaustion after having finished his 11th labor. The true treasures of the museum are found on the upper floors. There, the art, mosaics, and everyday tools of Pompeii are displayed. These valuable objects remind us that Pompeii was a Roman seaport, and that until the eruption of Vesuvius, people went about living normal lives as we do today. This fine mosaic depicting a baker and his educated wife decorated the walls of his home and bakery. This mosaic reminded visitors to beware of the dog. There were also common objects of the kitchen and the household. It all reminds us that the people of Pompeii lived lives similar to our own. That evening, I walked Napoli's Via Toledo with its horde of people and found an excellent restaurant to toast the end of my Soggiorno Italiano. I would fly out to Madrid the next morning. My plan for Madrid was to spend my days eating tapas, enjoying flamenco, and visiting Toledo.
Es la cosa más si preocupa.
My first night, I bought tickets for a 10:30 show at Cardamomo for Tablao Flamenco. I sat next to a couple from Brazil who shared tapas with me as we drank wine. The show was more modern than my preference, and it was featuring a well-known male dancer. He was superb, but I was most impressed with an 11-year-old who was brought out at the end of the show. Her poise and skill for someone so young was remarkable. It was the best part of the show. I took a day trip to Toledo the next day. My last visit there was in 1978 and I was 23 years old. All that had changed were the crowds. Thus ended on October 14th, my European trip of 2019. I flew out of Madrid the next day on Norwegian Airlines, premium class. What is the art of travel? For me, it is preparation and a travel style that emphasizes walking, staying in private homes, and speaking the language that surrounds me. It's knowing more about a place when leaving than when arriving. It's ignoring the heat of summer or a sudden cloudburst. It's braving the crowds, but finding places and moments of solitude. It's eating locally and courageously. The art of travel means sloughing off tired feet, lost passports, missing baggage, and getting lost. The art of travel is appreciating every moment, whether it exalts you or defeats you. The 4th century philosopher St. Augustine said, "The world is a book, and those who do not travel read only one page." Open the book of travel and learn its art.